Wonderful. All right, so this is our masterclass. I am Genevieve. I am the co-founder of Know My World, which we began in 2010 as a way to connect students across the world and facilitate virtual cross-cultural exchanges. And today we have Michelle joining us. Michelle, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle, and it's a sunny morning in Taipei. I am the founder and director of Elephant Communications based in Taiwan, and I'm also a corporate trainer at CLN in Asia. And thanks for joining.
Great. All right, so just to share a little bit more about Know My World, as I said earlier, we began in 2010 wanting to connect classrooms and facilitate exchanges so that students had an opportunity to learn with, from, and about each other. And we believe that education goes beyond just academic content and that it's important to educate the whole child. And so providing opportunities for them to learn more about themselves in depth and the world around them is really a big part of our goal and mission. So in order to do that, we focus on social, emotional, cultural, and academic learning. These are really our core pillars at Know My World. And the programs, the teacher training, and the exchanges that we facilitate all incorporate these concepts. All right, so diving in, what is culture? We all tend to have our own definition or idea of what culture is. So for this workshop or masterclass, we will kind of hone in on these areas in this definition. So culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people. So it defines important aspects of our identity. It influences our environment. It shapes our perspectives and our ways of being, thinking, and behaving. It is part of our language, our religious beliefs, our racial and ethnic characteristics, and it allows diversity among society. And I think it's very important to really understand how impactful culture is and how much it influences who we are and how we identify, because it really shapes us. And it's through that understanding of how important our culture is to us personally that we're allowed to or able to really understand that same value that it has in other people. And I know for Michelle and I, who've both lived abroad for quite some time, we've had ample opportunities to meet and interact with people from various backgrounds, and it's really enriched our perspectives of life in the world, and it's influenced the work that we do. So it's really a valuable aspect of life and the world, and it's important that we all cultivate this understanding, I think. So again, culture influences really every aspect of our personal lives and our global experience. It becomes part of our stories and our knowledge, the language that we speak, our rituals, traditions, how we celebrate, how we mourn, techniques and skills, what we bring to the world, our abilities, our knowledge, our understanding of how we do things and how we can use that knowledge in different tools and different ways. The art that we create, the food and drinks that we consume, the values that we hold, and just our sense of community. All of these are impacted by culture and our vision and perspective of culture. So Michelle's going to talk with us a little bit more about the layers of culture, which is a really important part of this understanding.
So all of us knows what an iceberg look like. Maybe not necessarily have seen it, but you get the basic idea, right? So the surface part of the iceberg is proportionally a lot smaller than the deeper part, the part that's below the ocean. So if we think about a country, a culture, or even an individual, we could use this analogy of the iceberg. So, for example, when we first arrive somewhere, we'll be able to very quickly pick up, oh, what type of food they eat, what language do they speak, what music does that culture like to listen to, what kind of fashion do they like to, to buy or wear. But then after we get to know it a little bit more, we'll start to learn sort of deeper aspects of the culture. And this might be more difficult to adjust to if they are very different from our own. So this iceberg framework works very well in terms of you as an individual interacting with a culture or living in a culture or even interacting with people from multinational backgrounds. So you can consider, what is this person or what is this culture's communication style and rules? What do they consider to be normal in terms of eye contact, in terms of body language, tone of voice? For example, a smile in one culture could indicate happiness, where in another it could indicate embarrassment. Okay. And then also concepts of self. What is your role? What is your identity within the society? Do you focus more on yourself as an individual, or as your part, or in terms of your part of the group? There's also vastly different attitudes towards, the elderly, towards the younger member of society, in terms of, do you focus more on cooperation or on competition? This will have huge differences, not only for adults, but also for younger students too. And then also leadership, cleanliness, beauty, all of these things will range vastly. I'm sure all of you have excellent examples about, differences of in view on some of these topics, as well as similarities. The basic idea is not so much that we need to categorize these in terms of someone's background or culture, but to have an awareness of these when you go forward into communicating with people from all aspects of our world. So later on, we'll talk about skills, about how to develop this awareness. For now, we just want to let you know that there is this concept and we can view cultures and individuals from this perspective.
Great. So cultural diversity allows us to value the differences that people have and really respect them and appreciate them. And really that's, I think the ultimate goal of cultural competencies is to appreciate the vastness and the uniqueness that each culture holds and contributes to the world. It helps us to grow and develop as a society. It adds complex layers that as one just mono-ethnic viewpoint wouldn't be able to have or hold as much. It provides new knowledge and lifestyles, introduces new concepts and new ways to solve problems, be creative and be innovative. And so again, cultural diversity is so beautiful and so powerful. And that's why, as an educator, I really feel that it's important that we start instilling this understanding in our students when they're very young, so that they can grow in union with people and peers who are from different cultural backgrounds and can appreciate the differences. And it's important because when they're not understood and they're not valued, this is what leads to the prejudice and the discrimination and the biases that inhibit our world from living more peacefully and more collectively. So understanding language is a big part of that. And Michelle will explain habits of language.
Yes, so today we are communicating in English. Everybody here can listen and, chat back in English. However, probably there are many people here whose perhaps first language is not English or have a very strong second or even third language. So you'll know based on your own linguistic background that the way that you'll communicate something in English will be different, for example, in Spanish or Japanese. Okay, so I saw this cute meme the other day that said, when I switch my language, my personality changes. And I totally agree with that because the way that language is based will totally shape how we communicate. So we can think about it in terms of high context cultures and low context cultures. So let's go on to the next slide so we can go deeper into this. So I want to explain this a little bit. This is not fixed and it's not absolute, especially if you are like me from a multicultural background. It might be difficult to place yourself exactly in one place, or you might change where you are according to the situation, which I can definitely identify with. Okay, but this is the basic idea which you can use a framework and adjust accordingly. So low context cultures are cultures that emphasize very precise and clear communication. So the message that I want to deliver is usually just as it is. My message is direct, I say what I say, and I expect to just give it to you, you take it, you listen to the words, and then you understand the meaning very simply. Okay. And then repetition is considered to be, a good thing. Like, for example, I remember when I was at university in the US, the classic presentation style is first, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Next, I'm going to tell you it. The third, I'm going to tell you what I told you, right? So this is kind of the repetition style. So then on the other side, the high context side, so for example, we have Japan, Korea, Indonesia, Kenya here. So high context cultures tend to be more sophisticated in the message, nuanced and layered, which means that maybe the message that I speak needs to be interpreted or understood according to the context of the situation. So there's more reading between the lines that needs to be done. And sometimes, not always, but often messages have an implication that are not necessarily plainly expressed. And often, sometimes, high context cultures have been living and working together for hundreds of years and have developed a system where they are able to communicate in more subtle ways without needing to be so apparent in the message. Whereas not always, but sometimes low context cultures are more newly formed societies that come from immigrant backgrounds where there are people from many different societies and cultures where there needs to be like a central code, a very clear message that everybody can understood. And there's no, sort of vague areas that could potentially impact the well functioning nature of society. And then, of course, we have cultures that are in the middle. We have here Poland, Brazil, Spain, Italy, Mexico, Argentina. So these countries will be considered to be not totally low context, nor totally high context. And maybe perhaps depending on the situation, they could adjust their style more easily. Okay, so this is a good concept to have, not so much to see from my perspective, for someone who's lived in many different types of cultures and worked with people who are multicultural in that society, is you don't necessarily have to think that, oh, this whole country is like this. But if you can be working with a group or an individual, you can have this awareness, and this might help you to be able to adjust your message.
And I just want to add, if anyone has any questions or comments during this time, please feel free to put them in the chat box.
Yeah, even if you just write a chat message, we'd be happy to respond to you during the session or afterwards too.
Yeah. All right.
So my native language is English. I grew up speaking mostly English. And I also had a second and a third language. But then when I moved to Taipei in 2007, after attempting to learn Japanese in Japan, I really made the effort to try to knuckle down, go to school, study Chinese. And over the years, I've been so amazed and interested how close the connection between the linguistic nature of the language and the culture is. So let's look at this example that I've made for English versus Chinese. However, these are just two examples based on my own experience. We could choose any two languages. So if we look at English, most of the time we are raised to believe that our message is our responsibility. Whereas in Chinese, it's a little bit more of a dual relationship where the speaker and the listener both have an active role in deciphering and in communicating the message. Okay, so this will make a big difference when someone whose first language is Chinese starts to speak English. They will take this habit as well as other habits into the way that they communicate. So when we are speaking with someone maybe who's speaking Chinese, French, Arabic, Hebrew, we should be aware that the way that they communicate in any certain language might be impacted by the linguistic nature of their own language. Okay, so again, just emphasizing this point about the meaning. In English, we just believe that we are responsible for conveying it very clearly. Whereas in Chinese, being a more high context culture, then the listener will be more actively listening to try and understand any message based on context as well as feeling. So maybe the same words could be used in a different situation, but the understanding of what the meaning would be very different based on the context. That's one of the reasons why we have less verb forms and past, present, future forms in Chinese. Okay. And then generally speaking, not always, and also it's changing because of social media and generational changes. But in English, traditionally, open disagreement, based on, if you go on to the next section, based on the Socratic method, is considered to be, let's go back for a second, is considered to be all right. Whereas in Chinese, open disagreement, especially to authority figures, would be frowned on. And then academic writing in English would definitely follow very clearly sort of, an answering question based on critical thinking and then narrowing down to the final result. Whereas in Chinese, it's more of a circular pattern with larger general ideas beginning and then later moving a little bit more closely to the main point. So we need to always keep in mind that maybe we are communicating using the same method of communication, whether it's English, Spanish, Japanese, but the meaning behind it could be very different. Okay, that's it for this part. Then the last part that I'd like to share from this section is that because of this, we should maybe adapt our behavior a little bit in terms of our communication style. So when we're talking to a more high context culture, we will use perhaps more downgraders, and a low context culture, perhaps we will use more upgraders. So for example, if you show me the cover of a magazine that you want to print, if I'm from a low context culture, for example, Holland, maybe it's very acceptable to say, that doesn't work, I don't like it, let's change it. All right, so you very clearly state your opinion, and then you directly give your suggestion. Whereas perhaps in a more downgrader culture, for example, where we are here in Taiwan, maybe we could say, oh, perhaps there could be a little improvement to make it better. What do you think? Okay, so I'm using words like maybe, a little bit, perhaps. So I'm softening the message. And then also the end is a question to have some collaboration before we move on. So there needs to be some discussion to emphasize our relationship before we can make a decision. So just these small little language changes that you can use as an educator, whether you're, communicating within the classroom or with the parents or with your coworkers, that these subtle changes could vastly impact how the receiver hears and as well as responds to your message.
Moving on to bias and unconscious bias. And this is something I think when you hear the word bias, it has a negative connotation, and we get defensive as humans to say, no, I'm not biased. I love everyone. I don't see colors. That was a big thing in the US a while ago, and we were like, that's not any better. So I think the first step is to really understand that we all have an unconscious bias, and the reason we have this is because we are inundated with so much information every day. Our brain has to kind of filter this information, and so it does it quickly. And this is a quick video to just kind of share a little bit about that idea. And hopefully, let's see, how can I, there we go. Hopefully everyone can hear. Here we go.
Our brain is hardwired to trust what's familiar and be suspicious of what's unfamiliar. It's a basic survival instinct that's helped keep us safe for thousands of years.
We unconsciously sort things into familiar versus unfamiliar, same versus different, them versus us. Here's a test. How do you feel about people who own a handgun,
Don't attend church,
Vote for the other candidate.
are on welfare,
Don't eat meat.
have tattoos,
don't believe in marriage,
drive an electric car,
Didn't go to college.
don't speak English,
Curse.
are over 60,
are disabled,
Drive the speed limit.
Love cats.
love dogs? Can you feel your brain sorting people into groups? Was there a little them versus us happening? It can happen unconsciously.
All right. So again, just a quick video to show that we all have to sort a lot of information, and because of that, we all tend to have a bias that often is from our cultural conditioning, our background, how we were raised. And if we don't acknowledge that we have an unconscious bias, then we can't be more aware of it, and we can't notice when it happens and adjust our thoughts and ourselves accordingly. So acknowledging that we have it and recognizing that that's okay, right? But then once we recognize it, then we can start to be more conscious of how we are labeling or filtering or categorizing different people or different cultures that we encounter, right? So we're going to do a quick activity. So with this, if you're able to grab a pen and paper, please do. If you aren't, you can use a cell phone and just make a list, or you can just do this mentally, but just write the names of 10 people who you trust outside of your family members, ideally. So I'll give you a few moments to just make a list of 10 people who you trust. If you're not done yet, that's okay, you can keep thinking. If you are done, then I invite you to take a moment and look at, oops, I hit the wrong thing. Look at that list and answer these questions. So how, right, what is their gender, what is their race or ethnicity, their age, their orientation, their education, are they disabled? So just kind of categorize these parts of each person who you wrote in your list. All right. So the reason this activity is valuable, it's something you can do with your students as well, if you'd like, but it's to kind of show us who we hold closest to us and who we trust the most are people who oftentimes, not always, but often, look like us, act like us, have the same beliefs as us, and who we connect with oftentimes in a lot of different layers, because we have the same background and the same cultural understanding. And so we tend to trust people who think, look, and act like us a lot more than people who don't necessarily do that. And it's one thing when we are talking about just people in general and as friends and things like that. But oftentimes in the workforce, this is where this becomes a problem, because it's people who look, think, and act like the administrative levels of people who get the promotions or who get the better jobs or the better salaries, more time off, extra benefits, things like that. And so again, whether we're working with kids or we're working with adults, really being able to assess how diverse is our community, our circle of friends, our trust circle, right? And the more we're able to diversify that, the more we're able to train ourselves to trust people more, who have different cultural backgrounds, and to value their work ethic, their values, their ideas, and see them as just as important as people who look and act like us, right? And so that's why this type of an exercise and reflection is really important and valuable. And again, that's something that you can continue to think about or work on as we move on. Or if you have thoughts or ideas about that, feel free to put it in the comments. So yeah, cultural bias. What is cultural bias? Basically, it's a tendency to, I'm sorry, one second. My slides are being blocked. Okay. A tendency to interpret a word or action according to culturally derived meaning assigned to it. So it comes from the conditioning and expectations, again, of our environment and our upbringing. So one example of this, as Michelle mentioned earlier, is the smile. A smile can be interpreted differently in different cultures or different contexts. Some cultures view smiles as deeply personal sign of happiness and only shared with people who they're intimate with, while others see it as an indication of general friendliness and meant to be shared with everyone as a sign that you are warm and welcoming. And others can interpret it as someone who's being disingenuous or inappropriate. So something as simple or as common as a smile across cultural contexts can have vastly different meanings, or be held in vastly different levels of importance. So our cultural competence for equity and inclusion is defined as the ability to live and work effectively in culturally diverse environments and enact a commitment to equity and inclusion. So basically, this idea of equity, inclusion, diversity is becoming more and more recognized as valuable and important in the US, and I'm sure other countries and cultures as well. But what does this mean exactly? And something that's important to notice is that self-awareness is always the first step of many different areas of personal growth and development, right? Because we have to notice our own thoughts, our own belief systems, our own behaviors, our own patterns before we can start to make changes to those. And we absolutely have to make those changes in ourselves first and foremost before we can teach or train or expect others to make those types of changes in their lives, in their patterns. So just noticing who we are and how we interact with the world, and being gentle with ourselves in that process, and knowing that we were conditioned in a certain belief structure and cultural context and government and religion and family and education, and all of these things have influenced how we see the world and interact with the world. And so if you want to make changes to that, that's wonderful. And if you don't, that's okay too, right? It's a personal choice. But once you have more of a self-awareness, then you can look and see the values of others, and you can understand them more, and you can be more open to their perspectives and their ways of living or being or thinking, and just understand that that's actually their conditioned growth and response, right? And then from there, we can look a little bit further, expanding our scope and understand the social inequities. We can choose to see them differently. We can see our personal privilege. We can see our biases. We can see different aspects of ourselves, and then look and see how, things have been systemically kind of conditioned in our cultures, and see what is fair now from this new scope of perspective, and what we no longer believe as being fair or true to other people. Our interpersonal skills to engage across different contexts. So interpersonal skills is, how do we communicate? How do we see perspective? How do we understand people from a different lens and acknowledge and accept and appreciate them? And how do we encourage others to share their knowledge and their expertise with us, especially if they're from different backgrounds? And then skills for transformation towards equity and inclusion. And the more that we're able to cultivate this understanding of cultural beliefs and cultural awareness and cultural sensitivity, the more we can be an advocate for change, and kind of penetrate the system from a different level or a deeper level, by helping to educate our students in a new way of thinking, or new way of seeing, or new way of interacting with the world. As educators, especially in the US, this is kind of a big kind of awareness video. If you cannot hear it, then just. All right, so I think, for me, again, as an educator, seeing this kind of video just shows how often, and this isn't the first one I've seen many in different workshops that I've presented, but just finding these types of examples where even from a very young age, you kind of see the history going backwards all the way to when he was like in preschool, and how teachers tend to just hone in and assume that, the students who are of different cultural backgrounds and ethnicities are the ones who are the troublemakers and problem causers. And there's just this assumption that they're the ones who need to be punished. And you can see the societal impact that that's had, especially in the US, with the number of people who are in prison. And when you look at the cultural diversity and background of those people, it's oftentimes people of different cultures and Latino or African American backgrounds. And so again, just being aware of our bias and how we're using that lens to see and interact with the world is important in order for those shifts and changes to occur.
So in terms of putting this all into practice, we suggest that the first step, before you can even begin to start to think about others, you need to understand yourself first. So you need to be aware of your own bias and your own behavior before you can even begin to bring in conceptually others into your sphere. So what you learn and then put into practice will not only be useful for those immediately around you, but all your relationships with fellow teachers, administration, students, parents, and then also, anyone you meet on any certain day. So we'll go on to the next slide. So by the way, if you guys do have any feedback or comments or questions, it'd be really great to hear from you. So there are 3 skills that we think are very important to develop, right? And this is kind of something we can think about as a short-term and a long-term goal. It's actually a lifelong practice, and it will evolve according to your environment as well as your stage in life. So the first one is about cultural humility, which is self-awareness of your personal as well as cultural biases and sensitivity to cultural values different from your own. So, if you look at the video that we just watched, if the people who were making judgments or assumptions were practicing cultural humility, their reaction could perhaps be vastly different. And then the second one, I think, is extremely useful, especially if you are working in a cultural environment or you are living in a country different from the one that you were raised in, which is reflected awareness, having the ability to recognize what impression you make on others. And so you can have a sensitivity to how your communication will be received, and you can adjust accordingly, which doesn't mean that you have to change yourself, but you can, adjust to meet the other person halfway. And then the third one is, more of an attitude based, which is having a mindset of curiosity and growth. So you are very interested, you're actively interested in building your awareness, appreciation, and understanding of cultures, leading to unparalleled growth. Another aspect of this that is interesting is very reciprocal. The minute that you take this step, the more that you cultivate this, the more that the people around you that are communicating with you will appreciate your efforts and, mirror back or give you back what you are giving to them. Okay, so this is a very interesting aspect of these 3. So we'll move on to the next. So the last page was a little bit more in terms of like your internal frame of mind and a kind of an approach to connecting with others as well as yourself. And these are specific tools that you can use when you're educating or communicating across cultural borders. As I said, it could be, you and a host culture, or it could be within sort of an intercultural environment. And I think this intercultural environment is more and more applicable to our very like global world, right? So the first one you could do is to be aware of who is in your classroom and use inclusive teaching resources and content, not only to represent all the different nationalities or cultures within your classroom, but also to perhaps represent those that are not, so that your students can continually expand their borders and awareness. The second one I think is important is having an ability to develop your negotiation techniques, because this will differ very much across cultural borders. And then methods for giving feedback, both negative and positive feedback, will differ vastly, and you can learn more methods that will be suitable for different situations. The next one is, how do you handle and show stress and emotions? This will be very different across the spectrum. And if you can adjust and become more sort of emotionally strong and intelligent, this will be of great benefit to you to communicate effectively, as well as to find ease even when you're out of your comfort zone. For example, I was a guest lecturer at a university here in Taipei, and when I was teaching, I was sharing something, and one of the students sort of said to me, it happened to be in Chinese. He said, "Oh, teacher, why do you have such a big nose?" I do have a big nose, but especially in Taiwan, my nose is really big. And so I turned to him and I said, oh, it's because my destiny is to become wealthy after 40 years old. And the whole group laughed. So why did I respond that way? It's because in Chinese society, face reading about your destiny is very important, and a big nose illustrates wealth later on in life. So who knows if it's true, but my purpose to answer that way was to, kind of connect with him on his cultural level, as well as to avoid reacting, in terms of like sort of any kind of personal affront to my identity. So to make him feel connected, and also to sort of relax the environment. And when I did that, his whole group that had previously been, a little bit unresponsive, became much more involved, and the class went like really great. So that's just one example of trying to find ease, even when you're being told something you don't want to hear. And then the next one is to always have emotional safety. Set your boundaries. This could be internal and this could reflect in the external situation. And then always adapt. As we said, this whole session has been about how to adapt and adjust, but always stay true to yourself. You don't want to go too far that you've lost your own identity. So if you can work on these, and we can develop these further in more master classes and workshops together, then I think you'll, be very adaptable and positive and successful in any cultural environment you find yourself in.
All right. And so as we wrap up, we just want to share about a program opportunity. Some of you are already familiar with this, and some of you, this might be new. But Know My World is offering a cross-cultural digital journaling exchange program. This is meant for students to provide an opportunity for them to meet virtually and connect and learn a little bit about and from each other. So the goal is to increase students' social, emotional, and cultural learning, expand their understanding of cultures, build their own confidence in reflective thought and sharing their ideas and opinions, and enhancing some of their academic skills as well. So the overview of the program is that it will begin in January with the teacher training, and then the teachers will be provided about 20 prompts that incorporate aspects of social, emotional, and cultural topics. And the students will have about 2 weeks to do their own reflective writing and journaling, and then another 2 weeks to share their journal with a global peer in another part of the world. And that way they will be able to read each other's responses and respond, and really learn about each other in a new way, right? And the benefit is that it enriches your curriculum as a teacher. We do provide 2 EdTech platforms that are secure, and we provides an opportunity for students to learn about someone else's culture and grow their own cultural competencies in these areas, and also to increase their 21st century skills, and global awareness, which these types of skills are becoming more and more important in today's workforce. So just a quick overview. Again, the teachers will have a webinar training. It'll be about 2 hours in January. And then, the students reflect and then exchange their journals and interact with each other. And then we wrap up with either a Zoom call if the students are close enough in time zones, or a culminating video where they can introduce themselves and share things that they've learned and appreciated or enjoyed during the experience. It's about a 6-week program and includes all of these different aspects. So classroom connection, facilitation support to provide ongoing help to the teacher, and helping with monitoring the students' comments and interactions. And we do provide certificates of participation for the students and a certificate of completion for the teacher. Overall, it's a really great experience. These are a couple examples of the the platforms. So the first one is Fan School, and that's a student blog site. So the students can upload, they can write the prompt, they can upload photos, they can upload videos or JPEGs, and then they can comment on each other's posts. And the other one is Manga Chat, where it takes the students' words and it kind of turns them into a comic strip. So they can type their experience and their emotions and different strategies. And then they can choose their avatar and the expression of the avatar and the background. And then they can take this JPEG and upload it again to the Fan School blog so they can comment and share. And it's a really great way for students to learn their own strategies for emotional identification and recognition, share aspects of their daily life and culture, and again, learn about others. Manga Chat, just quickly, recently won first place in a pitch competition. We are excited about that, and it just shows the value of the platform a little bit more. So we know teachers are busy. So just a quick overview of what we would ask. January is the start date with the training. And then after that, there'll be a 1-hour introduction meeting with the facilitator, introducing the teachers, looking at the journal prompts, matching the students, and then a 6-week program commitment. So we ask the students have on average between 15 to 30 minutes per day during the 4 core weeks of the program. And then the last week is wrapping up with the Zoom video. And we do ask for feedback from like a survey feedback to help us grow and improve the program. If you're interested in that program, there's a registration form here. There's a QR code. You can also direct DM me or leave a comment in the chat box, or you can stay on as we wrap up to ask any questions that you have regarding that program. But again, I think as educators, it's valuable for us to provide opportunities for our kids to connect with peers from different cultural backgrounds to start instilling the values of cultural competencies at a young age. So yes, this is for students in lower elementary all the way through high school. So anyone who's interested, feel free to let me know or register here. All right. And that brings us to the end of our session today. Again, we thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to unmute and ask, or you can type your questions in the comment, or you can stay on. Michelle and I will stay for a few moments to answer any questions that you have. All right. So hopefully this has been an interesting session for you. We've enjoyed presenting it, and we look forward to connecting with you more. Any questions?
Thanks everyone for joining us, whether it's evening or morning. Hope you have a great one, and welcome to ask any questions, or if you're ready for the rest of your day, you're welcome to head out. Up to you. Thank you so much.